Welcome to a deep dive. Today, we're stepping back in time, really, to witness a truly unique moment. It's preserved in these ancient texts, a conversation that unfolds right at the very end of a profound spiritual teacher's life. Our source material for this dive, it's excerpts from the Subhaddavatthu, which you find within the Dhammapada commentary. It's quite extensive. And these texts, they give us this really detailed account of an encounter. It happened during the final hours of the Buddha's life.
Yeah, and what's particularly striking, I think, is the setting. You've got the Buddha in the Sala Grove in Kusinara, nearing his parinibbana, his final passing. And the person seeking him out is this figure, Subhadda, someone who, well, according to the text, had actually missed previous chances to meet the Buddha for some specific personal reasons.
Right. So our mission today is really to unpack this very last recorded conversation the Buddha had. Before his death, we want to understand the three critical questions Subhadda brought and sort of explore the surprising direct insights packed into those answers, based strictly on what these sources tell us. No adding stuff, just what's there.
Okay, so let's start with Subhadda himself. He's described as a wandering ascetic. And the commentary tells us his past actions actually created obstacles, blocked him from meeting the Buddha earlier. There's this specific detail mention about him being reluctant, hesitant to give a pretty significant donation of rice to his own younger brother. Apparently, he only did it much, much later.
Okay, hang on. Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because of this past action, this reluctance with the rice, the text actually says he couldn't meet the Buddha during the early or even the middle periods of his teaching life. His chance, his window of opportunity, it only opened right at the very, very end when time was, seriously running out.
Exactly. Which brings up the big question. Why now? Why approach the Buddha at this incredibly critical final moment? Well, the text explains Subhadda had these deep doubts churning. Three specific questions. He'd apparently asked other older ascetics before, but he never felt satisfied, with the answers he got. And he realized he hadn't asked the ascetic Gautama the Buddha, partly because he had initially thought Gautama was too young when he first heard of him. So facing the Buddha's imminent death, he was just overcome with this fear of regret, terrified he'd miss his absolute last chance to get clarity on these things.
Oh, so driven by that fear, that urgency, he desperately sought an audience.
Yeah.
But the sources describe him being stopped at first, right? By Ananda, the Buddha's attendant.
Yeah, exactly. Ananda, who was, presumably protecting the teacher in his weakened state, trying to keep Subhadda away.
Makes sense.
But the Buddha himself, he heard the exchange. And he intervened. He specifically told Ananda, don't stop him. Let him approach. Let him ask whatever he wishes. Which really underscores the immense importance the Buddha placed on this final potential interaction. He knew it mattered.
So Subhadda was allowed in. The text says he sat below the couch where the Buddha was lying, and he posed his three critical questions. Okay, let's unpack these questions. They're quite something. Sure. Subhadda asks, 1, is there a footstep in the sky? 2, is there an ascetic outside your teaching, meaning the Buddha's teaching? And 3, are conditioned phenomena permanent?
Right. And the Buddha's response, according to these sources, it wasn't some long, winding discourse. It was very succinct. A teaching delivered in verses. And essentially, these verses assert the absence of the things Subhadda is asking about. They're negations, really. Then the commentary helpfully breaks down the meaning of these verses for us.
Okay, so the teaching starts with a line that's actually repeated for emphasis. There is no footstep in the sky. There is no ascetic outside this teaching.
Yes, and the commentary explains the term padai, footstep. It says that in the sky, there's no footstep because there's no physical thing, no form you can point to based on color or shape. The insight here is sort of about the lack of any permanent definable trace or path in something as vast and formless as the sky. You can't pin it down.
Okay, that makes sense, like trying to grasp smoke. And what about bahiro, meaning outside? How does the source explain that second part of the line?
Yeah, this is where the text is very direct, very clear. It states that outside means outside of my teaching, the Buddha's specific teaching. And the crucial part is why. The source says there's no ascetic, no spiritual practitioner outside of this particular teaching who has genuinely attained the path and its fruits, the actual realization of liberation. So the insight presented here, it's a strong claim, really, defining where true spiritual attainment, as understood within this tradition, is said to be found.
Okay. Then the verses add this. Beings delight in elaborations, papanyaka. Tathagatas are free from elaborations, nipapanya. Now that sounds a bit abstract. What does the commentary tell us papanyaka actually is?
Right. It does sound abstract initially, but the source explains that papt, meaning beings, just refers to, well, us, the ordinary multitude of beings in the world. And they delight in elaborations, or papanyeka. The text specifically defines papanyeka as things like craving taja and other related mental defilements, mental stuff. So the profound insight here, I think, is that ordinary beings get caught up, entangled in this constant mental proliferation, this elaboration, and they actually delight in it. They're bound by it, even find a sort of comfort in it.
Wow. They delight in it. And so Nipapanya, being free from elaborations, what's the commentary say about that?
Well, it states that the Tathagatas, the Buddhas, they are completely free from these elaborations. Why? Because all of them, every last bit, were completely eradicated, cut off at the root, as it says, at the moment of enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. So this points to the state of enlightenment not just as, intellectual understanding, but as absolute freedom from this mental noise, freedom from the craving and entanglement that we ordinary beings are usually caught up in. It's a state of, unshakable clarity.
Got it. So the verses then repeat the first two lines again, reinforcing them. No footstep in the sky, no ascetic outside, and then add, conditioned phenomena are not permanent. Sankara sasata nati. There is no wavering in jitai for the Buddhas. So let's break that down. Saukar, conditioned phenomena. What does the source identify those as?
Yeah, Sakhar. The source defines these as the 5 aggregates, which are form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Basically, the building blocks of our perceived reality and our sense of self, everything we experience, more or less. And the text crucially states that among these 5 aggregates, absolutely none is permanent, not one. This directly answers Sugda's third big question, and it powerfully reinforces that fundamental insight of impermanence, that all composite things, everything that comes together, is constantly changing, in flux.
Right, the core teaching of impermanence. And finally, inyidiya, translated as wavering. What does the commentary say that means, particularly about the Buddhas?
Injita. Yeah, it refers to the kind of mental agitation, like a subtle tremor, or, wavering, that's caused by defilements. Things like craving, again, conceit, wrong views. The commentary really emphasizes that for the Buddhas, there isn't even one single such wavering left. Nothing that would lead them to mistakenly believe, even for an instant, that conditioned phenomena are permanent. So the insight there is that the enlightened mind is just, utterly free from the misunderstanding and the agitation that comes from clinging to things that are inherently impermanent. It perceives reality with perfect stability and clarity, no wobble.
Wow. So after hearing these incredibly direct, profound answers delivered right there practically on the Buddha's deathbed, what was the impact on Subhadda? What happened to him?
Well, the sources are pretty explicit about it. They state that right at the end of this teaching, Subhadda became established in the non-returner stage. That's known as anagamaphala.
Non-returner.
Yep.
That's significant, right?
Oh, hugely significant. According to the tradition, it means he reached a level of realization where he wouldn't be reborn into the sensory realms like the human world after death. He was on a direct path to final liberation. It really shows the transformative power of this teaching for him, even delivered, at the absolute 11th hour.
Amazing. And the commentary also notes something else, doesn't it? That it wasn't just for Subhadda.
That's right. It mentions that this final teaching, this exchange, it wasn't just beneficial for Subhadda alone, but it also illuminated the path for the entire assembled audience. Everyone who was present at that critical time gained something.
Okay. So if we sort of connect this to the bigger picture, what are we really seeing here?
Well, this story, preserved in these commentaries, it really offers a potent, incredibly concise summary of core Buddhist insights. Things like the nature of reality, how it's impermanent, lacking any fixed footprint or self, the origin of our suffering, how it stems from this mental elaboration, this papanyaka we delight in, and then the state of enlightenment, this profound freedom from all that noise and agitation. And it demonstrates the sheer directness with which these deep truths could be conveyed, right up to the very end of a long teaching life. No messing around.
So what does this all mean for you listening today? I think it shows this incredible potential for deep understanding, maybe even transformative realization. Sometimes it happens in the most unexpected moments, or when circumstances seem really challenging, maybe when time feels short. It definitely highlights the power, maybe the importance of asking those really fundamental questions about the nature of things, and seeking clear, direct answers, not just accepting fuzzy ones. That was a truly remarkable deep dive into a conversation that happened right at the threshold of a life's end, a unique glimpse.
Definitely. A moment where these really urgent, burning questions met ultimate clarity, at least according to the source text.
So let's leave you with this, maybe a provocative thought to mull over. If conditioned phenomena, all the things we build our lives around, our identities, our possessions, our relationships, if they really are permanent, and if beings, as the text says, tend to delight in elaborations, in all that mental noise and projection, then what kind of footstep are you trying to leave in the world? And maybe more importantly, where are you truly looking for it? Is it even possible to find one there? Something to think about.